The next few years looks like it's going to be big for legendary veteran filmmakers. I mean, we've got Francis Ford Coppola making a self-financed mammoth $120 million project. Michael Mann is making a sequel to Heat. Steven Spielberg is working on another movie about aliens. Ridley Scott has a sequel to Gladiator coming out. Even Clint Eastwood, at 93 years of age, has a new movie coming out. Incredible. And there's been updates regarding Quentin Tarantino and Martin Scorsese's new projects. Let's start with Quentin. So as mentioned in a previous video, his next film, which will be his last film, as he's retiring from directing movies after his 10th film, is The Movie Critic, following a film critic who reviewed films for a porno mag in the 1970s. The script is done, Brad Pitt was attached to star, and the movie was set to start filming very soon. Well, all of that is now out of the window, as Tarantino will not be making The Movie Critic anymore. The film has been dropped. According to Deadline, Tarantino simply decided to change his mind about making the movie. This is pretty interesting news. Some Tarantino fans will be disappointed, but of course others will be thrilled, as those who didn't like this movie idea will now ponder on what exactly Tarantino's final film will be about. The possibilities are endless. There's loads of ideas he's had, as we explored in the previous video. You know, to be honest, Quentin seems to be unnecessarily making things difficult on himself. If I can just put my armchair critic glasses on, the man has set himself an arbitrary number of films, saying he'll make 10 and then he's out, because he doesn't want to reach the stage where he's past his prime and is old and is making bad films, as he claims other veterans have done. And he doesn't want that fate. He's often spoken about his filmography and seems obsessed with the idea of having a perfect set of films on his resume. This thinking is flawed on many levels. Firstly, his filmography isn't perfect. He made Death Proof, which was a misfire. Secondly, and I know I might be in the minority here, but I'd argue he has reached the stage where his films have declined in quality. Yes, they're good, but the films he made in the 90s were his best movies, and since the death of his editor, Sally Menke, his films have had major editing issues. Thirdly, he might consider Kill Bill one movie, but audiences had to pay 2 tickets, so he's already made 10 films. And ultimately, why limit yourself intentionally? If you've got a good movie idea, you've got a good movie idea, whether it's your 10th film or your 50th. In 10 years, is he going to get a good idea and then say, I can't make that movie because I already made 10 films? It's pointless. Nobody is forcing him to make 10 films except himself. Just make what you want, Quentin. He's part of a handful of directors who can get a blank check in Hollywood, and he should make the most of it. Imagine if Scorsese was so afraid of making a bad film, he only made 10. We'd have no Goodfellas, Casino, The Departed, you name it. Does he care? Is he crying because New York flopped? Because Silence made no money? No, he moves on. He's hungry. He's talked about still having so many stories to tell and no time to tell it because he's so old. And Quentin's the opposite. He's stopping himself making movies, even though it seems he has a lot of cool ideas. Spielberg would have never made Jurassic Park or Saving Private Ryan if he stopped at 10. Christopher Nolan wouldn't be an Oscar winner today if he stopped at 10. In fact, he's a great example. Many consider his recent film Tenet to be his worst movie, and he then goes and follows it up with the Best Picture winner Oppenheimer. I feel like Tarantino's thinking is becoming affected by this idea of his next film being his last. He's more concerned with the last movie of Quentin Tarantino, and maybe that's why he's dropped The Movie Critic, because now he's being very picky as to what his last movie will be about, and he's overthinking it instead of going out there, having fun and making a movie. And really, nobody's gonna care as much as he himself, so it's all within his own control to be or not to be so anal about his filmography. Do people think of the disappointing family plot when they think of Alfred Hitchcock, which was his final film? Or do they think Psycho, Vertigo? It's the same for Tarantino. He's always going to be remembered for films like Pulp Fiction, even if his next film is a dud. By the way, remember how I speculated in my video on The Movie Critic that Brad Pitt might be playing the same character he played in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood? Well, as it turns out, according to The Hollywood Reporter, that was the case. Pitt would have reprised his role as stuntman Cliff Booth. So let's move on to Scorsese. Now, I admit I was a little cheeky with the video title, because Scorsese isn't planning on making a pure gangster film, but it will have mafia elements. Before we get to that project, his next immediate film is actually one called Life of Jesus, which is set to be a Jesus biopic. Scorsese is interested in casting Andrew Garfield and Miles Teller in his film, and strangely, it's set in the present day. It is supposed to be 80 minutes long, independently financed, and according to Scorsese, it will explore Jesus' core teachings and principles. So it sounds like a small little passion project. I can't say that I'm really excited about this personally. It's not really my thing, but it makes sense when you consider the trajectory of Scorsese's recent career. His last wild film was The Wolf of Wall Street over 10 years ago. Since then, he did Silence, a deeply religious film about Jesuit priests facing persecution in Japan. Then he made The Irishman, which many thought would be a kind of roller coaster gangster film, but instead was about an old man reflecting on his life and thinking about death, which is where Scorsese currently is in his life. Then he tackled a genocide with Killers of the Flower Moon, ending the movie with a very interesting reflection on his own morality as a filmmaker and questioning the very limits of the medium itself, as we explored in a previous video. Add that to the fact that he is making a series about the apostles with Fox, has met the Pope several times in recent years, it's not too surprising that his next movie is literally about Jesus. After Flower Moon came out, and given this news and Scorsese's age, I actually thought that in terms of mainstream projects, Scorsese was pretty much done. Not so, however, because Scorsese is still hungry to tell classic Scorsese stories, and a classic Scorsese story has recently come out. He wants to make a Frank Sinatra movie, again. This is something that comes up every few years. Scorsese wants to make a Sinatra movie, he has a huge cast laid out, but the Sinatra estate refused to allow him to tell a warts and all style story, so Scorsese eventually drops the project. As well as his singing and acting career, Sinatra was of course also involved with the mob, and he had a turbulent private life, which Scorsese has been looking to explore. The way he's spoken about this project in the past has always been the vibe of a director who is desperate to make the story, knows he can't because of legal reasons, but if the opportunity was there, he'd drop everything he was doing and would go and make it. And apparently, Scorsese's camp have recently said he wants Leonardo DiCaprio for the role of Sinatra, surprise surprise, and Jennifer Lawrence as his second wife, Ava Gardner. However, as far as I can see, there hasn't been any development with regard to the Sinatra estate's position on the project. Maybe there has behind the scenes, otherwise why would this new news story come about that Scorsese is trying to make another Sinatra movie again? But it seems publicly there hasn't been a change. As Empire said, you might think Scorsese can simply hit a button at this point to indicate he wants to make a movie and everything simply falls into place, but it's far from that easy. Sinatra's daughter, Tina, controls her father's estate and hasn't yet given her blessing to the film, which isn't hugely surprising since it aims to cover the period where Sinatra's affair with Gardner broke up his marriage to Nancy Barbato, Tina's mother. This recent push for the project is quite surprising because in 2017, Scorsese said it was done. "We can't do it," Scorsese said. "I think it's finally over. They won't agree to it. Open it up again and I'm there." Well, it may have just opened up, and at the time, Scorsese described the movie as almost a combination of Goodfellas and The Aviator, which obviously makes sense. Like with The Aviator, you'd be following the life of a man as he goes from career to career, and it would have the Italian-American setting and also the mob stuff of Goodfellas. Speaking about the Sinatra estate, Scorsese once said, "Certain things are very difficult for a family, and I totally understand. But if they expect me to be doing it, they can't hold back certain things. The problem is that the man was so complex. Everybody is so complex, but Sinatra in particular." I was never really big on Scorsese's Sinatra biopic back in the day, but then when I learned more about the man, I could really see Scorsese's telling of his story excelling, and it seems a perfect match for the man, but it remains to be seen if this project will actually go ahead. So what do you think about this news regarding Tarantino and Scorsese's new projects? Let me know in the comment section down below. Subscribe to the channel and thanks for watching.